Vice President-elect Harris and I knew we'd have our work cut out for us when we got elected, but we also knew we could build a team that would meet this unique and challenging moment in American history. Some are familiar faces. Some are new in their roles. All are facing new circumstances and challenges. That's a good thing. They bring deep experience and bold new thinking. Above all, they know how government should and can work for all Americans. For Secretary of Agriculture, I nominate Tom Vilsack, an outstanding two-term governor of Iowa, the best Secretary of Agriculture I believe this country's ever had. He was there when the Great Recession was pummeling rural America. Over 8 years, he oversaw a record-breaking investment to bring us back. He implemented the Recovery Act to help rural communities recover and rebuild. Tom helped expand markets around the world for American farmers. He improved our food safety standards and helped millions of children and families receive healthy meals. He wasn't anxious to come back. He wasn't looking for this job, but I was persistent. And I asked him to serve again in this role because he knows the USDA inside and out. He knows the government inside and out. We need that experience now. 1 in 6 Americans and a quarter of the children in America are facing hunger. The opioid crisis in rural America is a rural America crisis, as is the climate crisis with droughts, floods, wiping out crops in small towns. Farmers and small businesses, small towns, rural communities, white, black, Latino, are reeling from the pandemic and economic downturn. Tom knows the full range of resources available to this department to get immediate relief to those most in need and address the crises, not one, the crises facing rural America. He knows how to build back better for all Americans. He helped develop my rural plan for America in the campaign, and he now has the dubious distinction of having to carry it out. It's a good plan. That includes making American agriculture the first in the world to achieve net zero emissions and create new sources of income for farmers in the process. By paying farmers to put their land in conservation, plant cover crops that use the soil to capture carbon, and it'll ensure that USDA promotes true racial equality and inclusion. He recognizes the history of discrimination and will root it out wherever it exists. I've known Tom for a long time, and I'm confident he'll get it done. For Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, I am really pleased to nominate Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who I might add could do many jobs beyond the one I'm asking her to do. But I think the job I'm asking you to do, Congresswoman, is critically important to everything that the Vice President and I believe is how we're going to build back better. As a former mayor, she understands how to manage challenges and forge solutions at a local level. For 12 years in Congress, she's represented the great city of Cleveland. You know, though I think her most significant political feat was being elected president of Deltas. I know from this state how powerful the Deltas are. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. She developed an entire career for fighting for working people on issues from affordable housing to urban revitalization. During the Great Recession, her district was hit hard by the housing crisis. She spent the past decade working to improve blighted neighborhoods, create safer, more affordable communities. She also understands where you live impacts on your health, access to education, jobs, and economic opportunity. Zip code should not determine the outcomes on all those issues. She's going to bring that same vision as HUD Secretary, using every lever at her disposal to help the millions of Americans facing evictions, trying to pay for their mortgages, find their way through this crisis. And I think you'll see that she's going to lead our charge to make housing more affordable and accessible. She'll work to increase home ownership as a means towards wealth generation, particularly for communities of color. It's not just dealing with the other issues. We have to be able to build wealth in communities of color. And she's also going to help us build back better by working across the ideological spectrum to fulfill the promise of HUD's mission. And here's what its mission is. It's often forgotten: to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. End of quote. And for Secretary of Veterans Affairs, I nominate Denis McDonough, former White House Chief of Staff, Deputy National Security Advisor, deep experience on Capitol Hill. I've known Denis for a long time. He shares my belief that we have many obligations as a nation, but we have only one truly sacred obligation: to prepare and equip our troops that we send into harm's way, and then to care for them and their families when they return. He regularly traveled, as I did, to Iraq and Afghanistan to meet directly with our service members, to see what they were going through, to understand the strain and the impact on them and their families. He'd visit them, as I did often, at Walter Reed to see firsthand the visible and invisible wounds they brought home. He knows the cost of war on veterans and their families, from the toll on their physical and mental health to the access to good-paying jobs. And he's a fierce advocate and a relentless workhorse. And in this role, I've given Denis a clear mission: fight like hell. Fight like hell for our veterans and their families. For the United States Trade Representative, we've nominated Katherine Tai, a trusted trade expert, a dedicated public servant who knows government, and who spent her career leveling the playing field for American workers and their families. That's not hyperbole, that's a fact. She currently serves as the chief lawyer on trade for the powerful House Ways and Means Committee, sharing praise from both lawmakers and both political parties, and from both labor and business as well. Now that's a feat across the board, but all kidding aside, I've gotten more calls complimenting me on your appointment than you can imagine. During the Obama-Biden administration, she was the chief trade enforcer against unfair trade practices by China, which will be a key priority in the Biden-Harris administration. She understands that we need a more strategic, to be considerably more strategic than we've been in how we trade, and that makes us all stronger, how we're made stronger by trade. If confirmed, she'd be the first Asian American and the first woman of color to serve in this position. And our nation, our economy, our workers, our businesses will be fortunate to have her serve in this role. As director of the White House Domestic Policy Council, I spent some time convincing this wonderful public servant, but I'm appointing Susan Rice, former United States Ambassador to the United Nations, former National Security Advisor to President Obama, former cabinet member, team player, policy heavyweight, through tough negotiator, and trusted and tested public servant, who I've known for a long time, not only admired, but become friends with. She'll lead and coordinate my critical domestic policy agenda. And she's going to elevate and turbocharge a revitalized Domestic Policy Council to help us build back better on every issue across the board. She'll work closely with my Director of National Economic Council, Brian Dees. She'll work closely with my National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and the National Security Council. Together, they'll align domestic policy, economic policy, and national security unlike ever before.